on September 19, 1961. Betty Hill and Barney Hill, an interracial couple, returning home from a late summer vacation that had taken them through Montreal and Niagara Falls, were traveling along US Route 3 under a vast, indifferent sky. The roads were empty, the kind of emptiness that amplifies every small sound. The hum of the engine, the occasional rustle of wind through the White Mountains, the steady breathing of their dachshund Delcy in the back seat. If any passing motorist had glanced their way, there would have been nothing to report. Just headlights slicing through darkness, a steady forward motion, two middle-class Americans, a postal worker and a social worker, both active in civil rights work and their local Unitarian congregation, heading home after a well-deserved break. No erratic swerving, no screams, no visible panic. Nothing happened. Yet by the time they pulled into their driveway in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, around 5 a.m., hours later than the 4-hour trip from Colebrook should have required, something fundamental had shifted. The clock had betrayed them. The comfortable predictability of their lives had fractured in ways they could not immediately name. What began as a simple drive home became one of the most influential cases in the history of reported extraterrestrial encounters.
Ghostline. What's your favorite paranormal story?
It's time to begin.
Not because of dramatic explosions or public spectacles, but because of an absence, 2 hours of time, that simply vanished from their conscious recall. This case did not merely add to the growing list of UFO sightings in the early 1960s space race era. It introduced the world to the deeply personal, invasive phenomenon of alien abduction and missing time, forever altering how humanity imagined its place in the cosmos. A drive that should have been simple refused to settle into memory. The Hills had planned the route carefully, familiar highways through the White Mountains, predictable mileage, the kind of journey that blends into the background of routine life. Betty, a college-educated social worker, and Barney, a World War II veteran employed by the U.S. Postal Service, no strangers to long drives or the subtle tensions of being an interracial couple in 1960s America. Their trip had been a belated honeymoon of sorts, a chance to escape the everyday pressures of community leadership and civil rights advocacy. Yet on that final leg, small inconsistencies began to accumulate. The car seemed to move more slowly than expected in places. A brief stop to walk the dog stretched longer in retrospect. Fatigue might have blurred the edges of time, they told themselves at first, but the discrepancy was not minor. It was not a matter of minutes lost to a roadside nap or a wrong turn. It was a measurable gap of approximately 2 hours, time that had disappeared between the moment they first noticed an unusual light in the sky near Indian Head and their eventual arrival home. The human mind abhors a vacuum. It rushes to patch holes with plausible explanations, drowsiness, misremembered landmarks, or simple error. This gap, however, resisted every ordinary repair. It remained stubbornly empty, a black hole in their shared timeline that grew more unsettling the longer they stared into it. When they finally reached their house, the world looked unchanged on the surface. The familiar furniture, the quiet streets of Portsmouth, the ordinary objects that had anchored their lives. Yet, an undercurrent of misalignment ran through everything. Barney felt it most acutely at first, not as a clear memory, but as a visceral unease that settled into his body like a low-grade fever. He was withdrawn, tense, unwilling to speak about the drive, even as the questions gnawed at him. Betty, by contrast, turned outward with curiosity. Where Barney buried the discomfort, she examined it, probing the edges of the experience as if it were a puzzle, demanding solution. Physical traces compounded the psychological strain. Barney's shoes were scuffed in ways that did not match their memory of the evening. The leather strap on his binoculars was torn. Betty noticed strange marks on her dress and an odd pinkish substance that resisted explanation. Individually, these details were trivial, easy to dismiss as wear and tear from any long trip. Collectively, they formed an insistent question mark hovering over that stretch of Route 3. What had interrupted their journey in the lonely miles between Lincoln and Ashland? These anomalies were not dramatic evidence like landing gear imprints or scorched earth. They were subtle intrusions into the everyday, the kind that whisper rather than shout, yet refuse to be ignored. The first real fracture in the wall of amnesia came not from conscious recollection, but from dreams. Betty began to experience vivid, recurring nightmares that felt qualitatively different from ordinary dreamscapes. These were not the fragmented, surreal collages the mind usually produces during sleep. They possessed a narrative coherence, a relentless consistency that made them linger long after waking. In the dreams, the empty road transformed. A bright light appeared, not a distant star or aircraft, but something deliberate, controlled, descending with purpose. The car halted against their will. Figures emerged, humanoid, silent, purposeful. Betty described being led, examined, observed in a setting that felt both clinical and otherworldly, far beyond the rural New Hampshire landscape. Each awakening left the images razor sharp, refusing to dissolve like typical dreams. They pressed against her waking hours, demanding attention rather than fading into obscurity. Barney did not share these specific visions, but he shared the emotional residue, a deepening anxiety that made even casual conversation about the night impossible. The dreams did not resolve the mystery, they amplified it, turning the missing hours into something active and alive in their subconscious. This divergence created a quiet but profound tension within the couple. Experiences of the unexplained often split people emotionally, even when they share the same event. Betty leaned into the unknown, discussing the dreams openly, seeking patterns that might connect the dots between the lost time and the strange sensations that followed them home.
There was one person there who spoke English in a very limited way, who kept trying to reassure us that no harm was going to come to us. They just wanted to do some simple tests. Both of our exams were very similar in most parts, and that they were very interested in our eyes, ears, nose, throat. They took scrapings of our skin, sample of our hair.
Barney resisted fiercely. He did not want to give the void shape or substance. Naming it risked making it real in a way that threatened his sense of control, yet resistance proved futile. Buried unease does not stay buried. Barney's anxiety escalated from subtle discomfort to noticeable distress. He grew irritable, avoidant, haunted by a sense of violation he could not articulate. The lack of closure was perhaps the cruelest element. There was no single traumatic image to process, no clear event to grieve or rationalize, only a gap and the heavy emotional freight it carried. In the broader context of 1960s America, where civil rights struggles already tested personal resilience, this additional psychological burden weighed heavily on a couple already navigating societal prejudice. Their interracial marriage and activism had prepared them for external judgment, but nothing had prepared them for an internal rupture in reality itself. 2 hours. That precise, quantifiable absence became the anchor of the entire narrative. Time is the one constant humans assume they can trust. It marches forward, leaves traces in memory and clocks, refuses to be erased. Yet here it had been stolen, not metaphorically, but measurably. The Hills had departed Colebrook expecting to arrive home by roughly 2 or 3 a.m. Instead, dawn was breaking when they pulled in. This phenomenon, later termed missing time in ufology, moved the case beyond mere aerial sightings into something far more intimate and disturbing. It implied not passive observation from afar, but active intervention, removal from the ordinary world, interaction on terms not their own, and return with memory surgically excised. The Betty and Barney Hill incident became the archetype for this experience, shifting public discourse from distant lights in the sky to close encounters that invaded personal autonomy. The pressure of unanswered questions eventually forced them to seek professional help. The dreams persisted, anxiety deepened. Ordinary explanations, fatigue, stress from their civil rights work, or optical illusions from a planet or aircraft, failed to satisfy. In 1963 to 1964, nearly 2 years after the event, they turned to Dr. Benjamin Simon, a respected psychiatrist specializing in hypnosis. Under separate sessions to prevent cross-contamination, fragments of memory began to surface. The process was emotionally raw. Betty's recollections retained the structured, almost story-like quality of her dreams. Detailed sequences of being taken aboard a craft, subjected to medical examination by beings who communicated without spoken words. Barney's memories emerged differently, visceral, terror-filled, marked by physical distress during the sessions. He described paralysis, observation, invasive procedures, and a profound helplessness. Here is Barney's actual hypnotic session with Dr. Simon, but be warned, it may be disturbing.
What did he tell you? To keep my eyes closed and don't open them. And never seen his eyes before. My God, give me strength. All right. Pull him down. Run. Pull him up and down and run. God. If there's my God, give me strength. I gotta get away.
Dr. Simon noted the emotional authenticity, the fear, the tears, the physiological reactions were undeniably genuine. Yet, he remained cautious, suggesting the accounts might represent a shared fantasy constructed from Betty's dreams and cultural influences rather than literal events. Hypnosis, after all, is not a flawless tape recorder of truth. It can amplify suggestion, confabulation, or repressed material. The debate over whether it reveals or constructs memory continues to this day, but the Hill's responses originated from a place deeper than mere imagination. At this juncture, the story fractures along familiar lines of belief and skepticism. Proponents point to the remarkable consistency between the couple's independent accounts, the physical traces, scratches on the car, the torn binocular strap, Betty's stained dress, and the emotional intensity that hypnosis uncovered. Betty later sketched a star map under hypnosis, which fueled further speculation about the encounter's possible extraterrestrial origin. The Hills did not merely report an experience. They transformed the cultural conversation about UFOs. Prior to 1961, most public reports centered on distant lights or objects, saucers in the sky, observed safely from afar. After their story broke publicly in 1965, the paradigm shifted dramatically. Encounters became personal, intrusive, and intimate. The idea that non-human intelligences could stop a car, remove people from their reality, perform examinations, and erase memory entered mainstream awareness. A 1975 television film, The UFO Incident, starring James Earl Jones as Barney, dramatized the terror and brought the story to millions. It influenced everything from Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind to countless later abduction narratives. The Hills case pioneered the template: missing time, medical procedures, telepathic communication, star maps. Whether rooted in literal truth, psychological stress, or a blend of both, it endured because it tapped a primal fear, the vulnerability of consciousness itself. In later years, Betty continued exploring esoteric ideas, while Barney's health declined until his death in 1969. Their legacy, however, outlived them, shaping New Age thought, conspiracy discussions, and popular media for decades. So what really happened on that lonely stretch of New Hampshire road? Did Betty and Barney Hill encounter intelligence beyond current scientific understanding, beings who studied them with clinical detachment before returning them to their interrupted lives? Or did their minds, under stress and the subtle influences of the era, construct a vivid screen memory to explain a more mundane lapse? Highway hypnosis, an unidentified aerial phenomenon, or simple exhaustion? Perhaps the truth lies in a realm just beyond human perception, where absence itself becomes the event. The most unsettling aspect is not the possibility of extraterrestrials, but the fragility of our own awareness. If time can vanish once, 2 hours erased without trace, replaced only by dreams and hypnosis, it can vanish again. For the Hills, the night that nothing happened became the night everything changed. The road remained the same, the stars indifferent, but their inner world had been irrevocably altered. The dreams did not fade. They seeded a mystery that continues to challenge our assumptions about reality, memory, and what might be watching from the darkness between the headlights. In the end, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction endures not because it offers answers, but because it forces us to live with the question, what if something did happen and we simply cannot remember? If this account of the Betty and Barney Hill case intrigued you, please subscribe to Ghostline and turn on notifications so you never miss future explorations into the unknown. Your support helps bring more of these stories to life.